Well, hello and welcome to another flipped lesson from me. I'm going to show you today, I want to pick up on where we left off yesterday where we were reviewing factoring. Of course, this is an Algebra 1 skill you should all be pretty decent at, but we are really going to focus on can we be a little quicker at it. And don't forget, our whole theme of what we're doing here is we're going to be making mistakes. A lot of factoring is guessing. And the more guessing you do, the better you get at it, but you're still going to make mistakes. Know that you're going to make mistakes. Know it's okay to make mistakes, but you have to check and see if what you did was correct, and if it's not, you have to correct those mistakes. So let's dive in with some basic factoring problems. Again, we already talked about these. We're just kind of reviewing a little bit. So first one, the directions say factor. And here are a couple factoring problems. It would be a good idea for you maybe to pause the video and give these a try. And then, when you're done with both number 1 and number 2, unpause the video and hear what we have to say. Well, welcome back. Hopefully you paused the video and tried these. When I look at problems 1 and 2, problem 1 looks a little nicer to factor because there's not a number here other than the number 1. Whereas number 2, it has this pesky 3 here. So in number 1, I know right off the bat, the way I'm going to get x squared is I need an x here and an x here. Now, what I have to do is I have to take a look and see, okay, where am I going to find two numbers that multiply to give me 12, and when I add them, I get a negative 8. And so you might think about these numbers for a little bit and see if you can figure out, oh, okay, what are the numbers, where are they? Whoops, sorry about that. It seems I switched my thing. And if you can't get it, if you can't figure out those numbers in 10 seconds, that's okay. We just are going to switch gears. So maybe we make a list of factors, numbers that multiply to give us negative 12, like 1 and 12 or negative 1 and negative 12. 2 and 6 or negative 2 and negative 6. 3 and 4 or negative 3 and negative 4. And of all of those factors, which ones do I add together and end up with negative 8? And so, after a little bit of time, you might look at this and say, well, nope, not those, not those. Oh, that's positive. Nope, not positive. Those are my numbers right there. And if those are your numbers right there, then we want to put a negative 2 here and a negative 6 there. And we're factored. And you can do a quick multiplication to see if you're right. Over here, oh, geez, this 3 causes a lot of issues. So, we know we're going to have a 3x and an x. That's the only way we're going to get 3x squared. But now we've got to play with that negative 8. Oh my goodness, that negative 8. We've got to think about what two numbers multiply to give us a negative 8. Well, we have a lot. And the first ones that come to mind would be like a 2 and a 4. And so I'm going to try a 2 and a 4. And this may be a good set of numbers to try. It may not be a good set. I'm going to put the 2 here, and I'm going to put the 4 here. And let's see what happens. Again, I'm just guessing. Well, that gives me 12x. That gives me 2x. I can't combine 12x and 2x to get a 2. And that means, well, I don't want to use the 2 here and the 4 here. It doesn't mean they're bad numbers. It just means those aren't the numbers I want to use. So maybe I switch these. Maybe I put the 4 here and the 2 here. Let's check the math now. 3x times 2 is 6x. 4 times x is 4x. 6x and 4x, I can get 2x. I can get 2x. And remember, our goal is we want to get this number right there, 2x. So now all I have to do is play with the signs of those numbers. I know I need a negative. So the signs are different, and I feel that I want to put the negative here and the positive here. Let's check. 3x times 2 is positive 6x. Negative 4 times x is negative 4x. And sure enough, those do add up to be 2x. Okay? Let's try one more as practice. Let's try this one. And we see here that we've got a binomial. Now, we practiced these yesterday. See if you can do this. Well, welcome back. Did you remember we call this a difference of squares? 49x, that's a perfect square. 100, that's a perfect square. That's the square part. And it's subtraction. That's the difference part. What number times itself is 49x squared? 7x. What number times itself is 100? 10. And then all you have to do is remember to change the signs. One of these is negative, one of them is positive, and that's your answer. And I just want to remind you of this term, same numbers, different signs, conjugates. But let's get into the meat and potatoes of today. Today, before we get into our super special lesson, let's talk about a special property we know about 0. Suppose I multiply two numbers together and get 0. What does that tell me about one of these numbers? Well, it tells me that one of these numbers has to be 0. It could either be the A or it could be the B, but one of them has to be 0. And 0 is the only number that works for. When you multiply two numbers together and get 0, one of them has to be 0. This has a name. It's called the zero product property. And we're going to see how this is used in the next set of problems. So let's take a look at changing the directions. We just did problems that said factor. Now I'm going to switch it to solve. Notice when I switched from factor to solve, I added an equal sign. And this means that we've got to find the value or values of x that make this equation true. So how do we do that? Well, I happen to have a strategy right here. Anytime you're trying to solve an equation that has an x in it, an x squared in it, it's a three-step process. Step 1, get everything on one side. Check. We have everything. The x squared, the 2x, the negative 35, they're all on one side. The other side, we want to be just 0. And we want to write it from highest power to lowest. Step 2, factor. So I want you to take a second and factor the left-hand side of this. Hopefully, you ended up with that. Step 3, we're going to use the zero product property. What does that mean? Well, if we take a look, I have two numbers here. There's one and there's one. That when we multiply those two numbers together, I get 0. And what we just learned on the previous page is any time that happens, that tells you that one of those two numbers, maybe it's the first or maybe it's the second, but one of those two numbers has to be 0. So that gives me an equation. On the left, I could subtract 7, and I get x equals negative 7. On the right, this right equation, to solve for x, I would add 5. And that tells me x equals 5. And right there, those are my two answers. It's a very simple three-step process. It's just the directions have changed from factoring to solving. And even though the directions say solve, if it has an x squared term in it, by golly, we are going to factor. Let's try another one. Let's try another one. I happen to have one right here. Okay, we have this three-step process. Step 1, get everything to one side. Now, here's a little hint. Whenever I factor, I like to keep my x squared term. I like to keep that positive. So I'm going to move everything to the left-hand side. So I'm going to subtract an x, I'm going to add a 20, and I get that. Check and make sure you're okay. That to move this x to this side, I subtract it. To move this 20 to this side, I had to add it. Step 2, we're going to factor. So this needs to be factored. You might pause the video and try it. Did you pause it? I hope you paused it. When we factor this, we get that. And then step 3, we're going to use the zero product property. Again, anytime you multiply two numbers together and get 0, that's telling you. It's telling you that one of those two numbers has to be 0. Maybe it's the first number, x minus 5, that's 0. Or maybe it's the second. Maybe it's the x plus 4 that's 0. One of them has to be 0. And when you take this equation over here on the left and you solve it for x, and this equation on the right and you solve it for x, you get those values. See how that worked? Let's do just one more and see if you have it down. Here's the last one. Good golly. It's got a 3 in front of the, oh, this is going to be a good one. Process doesn't change. We have an x squared term. You're thinking, oh, heavens, I have an x squared term. Whatever shall I do? Well, 3-step process. First, get everything to one side. I like my squared terms to be positive, so I'm going to move everything to the left side. And I get 3x squared minus x minus 10 equals 0. Step 2, I got to factor. So I come down here. Now, really, I mean, this time, pause that video. Pause that video and factor that. I'll wait. Hey, did you come back? Did you come back? Did you factor it? This is a tricky one because of that 3, but if you spend time, if you guess, if you inspect, and you correct, you should be there. And then, now, what do? Well, we factored. So now we're going to use the zero product property. Why? Because, again, factoring forced multiplication to become the main operation. And I am multiplying these two numbers right here together. And I'm getting 0. And that could only mean one of two things. That either means that this 3x plus 5 is 0. I'm trying to write with the mouse. It's not going very well. Or it means that this second number, x minus 2, is 0. So now I just have two separate equations I have to solve. This one on the right, that's pretty easy. I think everybody sees that x has to equal 2. This one on the left, though, oh, geez, I've got some work. I mean, it looks like I have to subtract 5 from both sides. Again, I'm writing with the mouse. And I get 3x equals negative 5. And I have to keep going. I have to solve for x. Not there yet. So I'm going to divide both sides by 3. Ooh, a fraction. Nice. And I end up getting x equals, well, I mean, this is the beautiful part about embracing fractions. The answer is just negative 5 over 3. So I have two answers, and there they are. So I hope that lesson worked out well for you. I have some problems I would like you to practice. So take some time, practice those problems. Let's see how you do.